I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a cherry pie, and this is what it looks like. It has a top and a bottom crust with a juicy sweet cherry filling. And what's a little different here, as you can see, is instead of just putting a round of pastry on the top, we're actually going to make pastry stars, which I think really gives this pie a cool look. So the first thing you need to do, of course, is we need a pie crust. There is a recipe along with the video on the site how to make your pie crust, the pastry. And then once you divide it in half and you chill your pastry, what we're going to do now is roll it out. So just take one of your rounds and always lightly flour your counter. And then put your pastry right on there. And then you will need a rolling pin and lightly flour your rolling pin. Now as you're rolling, try to roll from the center out and always keep turning your pastry and then putting more flour down if it sticks. Now if your pastry is cracking as you're rolling, it could be a little cold. So what you could do is either just let it sit on your counter a few minutes, or you could just take your rolling pin and kind of bang it, and that kind of softens it. Conversely, if you find it's really falling apart, then you could just put it back into the refrigerator. Maybe it's a little too soft. So what we're going to do is roll this into about a 12-inch, 30-centimeter round. I have a ruler, you could use your ruler, or another way of doing it is to just take your pie pan and turn it upside down, and then you want it, of course, a little larger than your pie pan. Now you will need a 9-inch, that's 23-centimeter pie pan for this. Whatever your favorite, some people like glass, some people like ceramic. I like the metal. Really, it's personal preference here. So just keep rolling and turning. Try to get into a, pretty round shape. If you need to, just kind of with your hands go around. And you want to have your pastry an even thickness. So I just kind of roll my hand over the top, and you can kind of tell which part is more thicker than others. And if it's a little thin, sometimes on your edges, just kind of, don't worry if you're new to pastry rolling and making it. It takes a little practice, but the good part is you can just patch it up and it's going to taste good. That's the great thing about it. Okay, that looks pretty good. I just kind of put over that, and I've got some space all the way around, so that's good. So how I transfer it is I just take my rolling pin and just loosely roll my pastry. Now, if there was a lot of flour on your pastry, just take a brush, or you could just use your hand and take that excess flour off, and then unroll it on the top of your pan. Now, the important thing when you're fitting your pastry into your pan is not to pull it, because then that's where, if you've ever had pastry that shrinks as it bakes, that's probably why, is when you were putting it in, you might have pulled it a bit. So just kind of put it up and place, don't pull. And if it rips a bit, just don't worry about it. You can just patch it up. So I'm just kind of making sure it's nice down into the pan. I take my finger and just kind of go around, make sure it's fitted right into the corners, like so, and that looks good. Again, if you're new and it's ripping a bit, don't worry, just patch it up. If you need a little water, because you know what, once it bakes, no one's going to know. Only you will know. Okay, and so then I'm just going to, now some people, if you like a lot of crust, then you could tuck any excess up under itself. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to make sure it's flat in there, and then I'm going to take just a knife and I'm just going to cut my edges off. It's gonna, you can see I'm just slicing it off. If you have excess pastry like I have here, don't throw it out. Just gather it up, and you could make, you know, on the site there's a jam tart recipe. You could use this pastry and make some little jam tarts. So then you could leave it like this, or I like a little decorative edge. So, I mean, you can do it any way you want. You could just take a fork and make a fancy, or I like to take 2 fingers like this and see if you can see that, and then just like so. Pretty design there. Okay, that looks good. So that's our bottom crust. Now I'm just going to cover it because it is a little soft and we'd like to firm that up. So I'm just going to cover that, put it in the fridge, and next we will roll out our top crust. Okay, so now I've rolled our second round of pastry into a 12-inch, 30-centimeter round, and then I'm going to cut out some stars. I've just got about a 2.5, which is 6-centimeter star cookie cutter. If you don't want to use stars, you could use circles or some other shape if you want. And then I'm just going to cut out our stars. And then I have a parchment-lined baking sheet here. You could just, if you don't have parchment paper, you could just use, you know, even wax paper for this, because we're just going to put these, once we cut them all out, we're going to put them back into the fridge just to firm them up. So just keep, you will need about maybe 18, somewhere around there, depending on if you want to cover the whole top with stars. Okay, that should be good. So again, keep your scraps of pastry, and I'm just going to cover my pan and put this in the fridge so the stars can firm up, and when we come back we will start our cherry filling. So now for our cherry filling. In a large bowl I have 4 cups, which is about 1 liter of cherries. Now, there's some choices here. You can use fresh cherries, or you could use the bottled or the canned cherries. You can use sweet. You can use tart cherries. You could use a combination. So in the summer when fresh cherries are available, you could use those, and then other times of the year you could use the bottled or the canned. Really, there's so many choices here. I'm actually using the bottled tart, or some are labeled sour cherries. You want, if that is the case, you want to drain your cherries, and when you buy them, don't either buy the ones that are packed in water, or you could even use the ones that are packed in a light syrup. Don't use those ones that are packed in the really heavy syrup. So like I said, if you're using the bottled or the canned, drain them first. Of course, if you're using fresh, make sure you take the pits out, and because you don't want to be too much mess to have to take the pits out while you're eating your pie. So we have it in a large bowl. Now, if you're using, like I said, the bottled or the canned, keep 1/3 of a cup, that's 80 milliliters of the juice, and I'm just going to add that. And then for added flavoring, I mean, you don't have to add this, but I find it just adds, you know, a little more complexity of flavors. I'm adding 1/2 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, and then I'm using 1/2 teaspoon of a cherry liqueur. If you don't want to use that, you could add 1/4 teaspoon of pure almond extract. That kind of really brings out that cherry flavor. And then to prevent the cherries from turning brown, I am adding 1 tablespoon of freshly squeezed lemon juice. And then I'm just going to toss that. And then, of course, we need sugar. Now, taste your cherries, because I'll give you a guideline of the amount of sugar, but if you're using fresh cherries, sweet, then obviously you don't need as much sugar as if you were using all like a sour or tart cherry. So you could use up to like maybe 3/4 of a cup, 150 grams of granulated white sugar. I have found sometimes when I was testing this recipe, the bottled cherries I used were really sour. So I even added a little more than the 3/4 of a cup and 150 grams. So again, taste and then go according to that. And then just a pinch of salt, 1/8 of a teaspoon, because that just helps to bring out that cherry flavor. And then we need a thickener, of course, because as it bakes, the fruit releases its juices and you need something to thicken that up. And so I'm using about 2.5 tablespoons, which is 30 grams of a quick cooking tapioca, also known as a minute tapioca. And the reason, I mean, you could use a cornstarch, but tapioca, the good part about that is, ingredient is when it thickens the juices will still be clear, and that's what I like. And that's why I'm using that. So just stir all that together. And now what we're going to do is just let this sit for about 10-15 minutes so that the ingredients can all get absorbed and mixed together. And while that's sitting here, preheat your oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 220 degrees Celsius. Now, if you're using a oven that has the element on the bottom, have your oven rack in the lower third of the oven, because you want the pan to be pretty close to that bottom element so it will cook the bottom crust. Of course, if you're having using a convection oven like I am, your rack placement is not as important. And when we come back, we will assemble our pie. So now we're ready to assemble our cherry pie. So put your chilled pie pan on a baking sheet with a piece of parchment, and that will prevent, if we have any spillover, we won't spill over into our oven. And then we'll just pour the cherries along with all that wonderful juice into our pie pan, and then just level the top. I'll just bring this over here so I don't have to reach. So there we have, oh, doesn't that look gorgeous? This is going to be so good. So that looks good. And next, what we want to do is take 2 tablespoons, 25 grams of butter, and then just cut it into tiny pieces and just dot the top. It's going to add a little more flavor to our pie. And now we're going to take our pastry stars and put them over the top. Now what I have is a little cream. So I have a little cream, a pastry brush, and then just brush the outside crust here, because we're going to kind of put our pastry stars and we want them to stick to the crust on the outside. So this cream acts like a glue. Okay. Looks good. And then we'll just start. So I take it and then just press it down so it sticks there, and then take your next one, kind of overlap the stars just a bit, and then just press down and work your way around. Got that. And then we'll just start. What I like to do is just lightly brush your stars with a little cream. Okay, and then we'll try not to have it pool too much, and then we'll just put another row of stars. Doesn't that look pretty? So cool. There, looks good. So now just brush those with some cream. Oh. And take a little granulated white sugar and sprinkle the top. So now we're going to place it in the oven. First, you want to bake it for 15 minutes at the high temperature, and then lower your oven temperature to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius, and then continue to bake your pie for about somewhere between 25 and 35 minutes. What you're looking for is the crust to be a gorgeous golden brown color, and you will start to see the cherry juices bubbling, and so that's when you know it's done. Now, a lot of times the outside crust does tend to brown faster than the center, so it's a good idea to either have one of these pie shields that you just place over so it prevents the outside of your crust from burning, or you could just use aluminum or some foil. So usually it's towards the end of baking, so just watch your pie, and if you see it over browning, then just use your pie shield. Okay, our cherry pie is done. I did have to put the pie shield. Oh, doesn't that look gorgeous? So now I put the baking pan on a wire rack. Now you never want to cut into your fruit pies immediately. You want to let them sit usually like 3 to 4 hours, because you need the juices need time to thicken and some of them be absorbed back into the cherries. And if you cut it too soon, what you will have is a very runny pie, which we don't want here. So I'm going to let this sit probably 3-4 hours, like I said, and when we come back, we will try a piece. So it's been about 3 hours, so let's cut a slice. So you'll just need a sharp knife, cut through, and cut this way. And okay, see if we can get that first piece out. Good. First piece is always the hardest. It's usually the one I end up with. Okay, so there we go. Oh, doesn't that look gorgeous? Get that nice buttery crust, nice and golden brown, and the cherry filling. So let's try some. Oh, that's wonderful. The crust is so buttery and so crisp, and then you have the cherries, and it's got a nice bit of juice there. Absolutely delicious. This is Rick's one of his favorite, along with peach pie. So give it a try. And it's very good with a scoop of vanilla ice cream as well. So until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of JoyBaking.com.